are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm great. I know that we have a lot of very serious things to get into today, but I have to admit my attention is slightly diverted because I was just working on putting together a piece of content for one of the outlets I work for, trying to piece together the Olympic flag football team. My attention is very distracted by this. You give me a look here. Do you not share the same excitement that I do right now?
No. Can I tell you why?
Why?
I want countries around the world to put on pads and helmet, and let's.
They're not gonna do that, man. We would kill someone. Like we literally would kill someone.
I want to get the dream team of football and go out there and demolish somebody. Because here's the reason I say that. Let me tell you why I say it. Because I hear the World Cup, the 2 World Cups ago, I was in Asia. I was in Japan. I was in China, and then we went to Thailand. Okay, don't ask me what we were doing. We were actually doing something really good. We were building houses for people. Okay, they went through a critical time. Whatever. A lot of the people we knew were living there. Whatever. So the World Cup was going on. And so when we were watching the World Cup with all of our friends, they kept telling these Asian people that were from all over Asia who were helping us do this project we were doing, were telling us that the world has better athletes than America. And as hand to God, I said, bitch, if LeBron James wanted to play soccer and would have played soccer his whole life, y'all would have gotten y'all's asses whooped, which then started, which started this whole debate of the world has better athletes than America. And I was like, hold on. You mean to tell me that you think that Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes are losing to you if the sport wasn't football? Get out of here with that. By the way, you know what I'm really intrigued by?
Okay.
Captain America coming to USA's rescue. Paul Skeens going to pitch in the World Baseball Classic.
Oh.
And I heard, hold on. Deep sourcing, you ready? Okay. I heard Paul Skeens was calling around to guys like Mookie Betts and others, to all of these superstars saying, we're winning. So are you on or not? Now,
interesting.
Right here in the studio is a couple of signed things from Mr. Paul Skeens. I'm not going to tell you where I got that from, but I know it for an outright fact because I have the evidence of said source potentially doing it. So I don't like the flag football thing. I want them to put on pads and lay people out. Sorry for taking your take here, but.
No. You're not taking my take. Here's my only argument, though, against that. I totally get it. They're not going to be able to field a team that's going to do anything if they put pads on. But I would argue it would be so much more disrespectful to them if we're able to line these dudes up with very limited preparation, that they just go out there and play football, not used to playing the flag game. It's a very different game, and smoking them, just completely smoking them because they don't know how to keep up with all the NFL guys.
Not my problem.
That's my point. Not
my problem. I
will say,
soccer might be the 5th biggest sport in the States.
Okay, what's your point with that?
What I'm saying is that you're not getting the top tier of athlete. If everybody went into it, we got to get an even playing field. That's why when you get to the Olympics and everybody sees getting them cheeks clapped, and the United States walks away with 20 gold medals, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, how did that happen?" Well, I wonder how it happened.
I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, there's a reason. It's pretty clear. It's just soccer's just not popular here. All of our the bottom tier athletes end up playing soccer, or people that originated from other countries play soccer in the U.S. There's a reason why the women's team is so good, because there's no female version of football that is equally as popular. A lot of the best female athletes play soccer, or they go to the WNBA.
This is true. All I will say is this: what country would win if they did an OnlyFan off?
How do you score that?
I mean, we do Miss Universe pageants. How does that scored?
I don't think the U.S. would win, if I'm being completely honest.
I think it's going to be somewhere in South America, Central America.
Brazil, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I'll OnlyFans off. Alex says rather have top high school recruits, college guys. With a $2 super chat. What does he mean by OLY?
Only, like no NFL guys. I don't mind this. I think it would kind of also play to the hilarity of like, hey, we dogged you so bad with our college guys that it was basically what we used to do in basketball until the rest of the other countries started to catch up.
What he's saying. I see what he's saying. Yeah. All right. Well, this would be an interesting segment. Who would be your quarterback?
If we pick the college guy?
Yeah, if we had to pick a college guy.
I would want to pick Lenore Sellers. Lenore Sellers would easily be my pick. I was trying to think of I want someone mobile. My NFL pick was Jaden Daniels because I want someone mobile that can throw on the run without losing accuracy.
Football with Malik and them at LSU.
Something?
Did you ever see that? Yeah, they did did something like that. You know, he didn't. He had 3 drives. He scored all 3 touchdowns.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. I would pick Arch.
He's a good athlete and he's accurate, so that one makes a lot of sense. I'm good with that one.
I mean, you'd have 3. I'd pick Arch. I'd pick Sellers, probably Klubnik.
You can't like scramble, but you have to be able to throw on the run because there's a rusher. I don't know enough about it, admittedly, but there's a free rusher that's coming at you, so you need someone who can improvise. So those guys all fit the bill.
Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams. I mean, it would be chaotic. I mean, it would be absolutely chaotic. All right. We got lots to get into here. Joe, let's go ahead and get to a break, and when we come out of it, we'll talk about this college football commissioner. USC versus Notre Dame rivalry coming to an end, potentially, and then we'll go to our Illinois deep dive. But before we get to that, everybody do us a favor. Hit the like and share to all those groups if you're on Facebook and to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, and wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. When we come back, to anybody that's watching me and Joe right now, I do have the SEC baseball tournament live right up here in the studio. Yes, I'm not going to keep my eyes off of it. But nevertheless, Joe, I never thought I'd see the day, but not Pat, I almost said Pat 40, but Pete Thamel of ESPN came out yesterday and wrote an article about what might be, and I'm going to say this, what might be the biggest kept secret in all of college football. I did not know that this was happening. I did not know that there was going to be a college football commissioner, and let's call him what he is. You're putting a college sports commission is what it's called. And you're heading up a CEO per Pat 40. In his article, he writes that there's going to be a CEO of college football that, and I quote here, that will have the final say in doling out punishments for violating rules and will have the last say in governing body activities. So basically, per Pat 40, there I go again. Per Pete Thamel, we're basically about to get a college football commissioner.
You led this in really well because last night I'm sitting.
You. It's like I do this full time.
I'm saying that you led this in with the same sentiment that I had. I almost tweeted this out and I was like, you know what? I'll wait till I get to the show. Last night I was sitting and I was watching some film and my phone buzzes and I look over it. It's another ESPN notification. I'm like, okay, I wonder what this is. And I see commissioner or CEO of college athletics. And I look over, I'm like, what is this saying? And as I read through the article and I texted it to you, my thoughts started to like build. Why are more people not talking about this? I saw Ross Dellinger reference it. I saw Andy Staples reference it, but from a different angle. I don't know if people are waiting for the House settlement to come through at the end of this week or next week, but this is the most significant change that could happen to college athletics that we have ever seen. This doesn't stack up against anything else. Not the college football playoff, not even the House case itself. We are going to have a singular leader that is going to direct, more specifically, punishments against universities at all levels of athletic or in all sports. I'm blown away that.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I'm blown away that this isn't getting more coverage, and this is going to be very massive for us fixing things. And it sounds like that is the sentiment across the sport. We're actually doing the right thing. That is why I am so shocked, Blake, is because I'm so used to the wrong answer being provided, the wrong step happening. And this actually on paper is the right thing for once.
I do agree that it is the right thing, but I will pause you on one thing. The one thing I'll pause you on is that Pete Thamel also reports, and I'm quoting here, that all teams per their conferences have to be on board.
Yeah. Yes.
So there's also a chance that this is not passed. He also mentions in the article that this won't be finalized and cannot, and he brought this up 4 times, cannot happen until the House case is settled. So we've talked a lot about the House settlement case here, but I want to bring this up. I don't think that I think you're going to be a little bit surprised about how many teams are about to vote no here. I really do. I do think that I'm going to tell you right now, I do think teams like Ohio State, Texas, and others are going to vote no. Now, you're never going to know who votes yes and no, and they might even come out and say it's unanimous. Joe, I'm going to tell you something. I sent this article you sent me to a coach, and I'm gonna vague this loosely. You'll know who I'm talking about. Loosely, the people around him. I was told by a major head coach in college football, we ain't voting yes for that shit. Because you got to understand, in Thamel's thing, it says here that all Power 4 commissions will be a part of the committee. Now, you would have to really trust Greg Sankey or Tony Petitti to fight for you in those situations. Who is this guy going to be? But he also brought up something to me that I thought was interesting. Nick Saban came out today. Did you see this? Kind of following this thing on ESPN today or yesterday, saying we don't need a commission. We don't need this. Now the Paul Feinbaum interview makes a shitload of sense to me now. Stay with me. Why was he so gung-ho when he met with President Trump, accepts the commission, and then now all of a sudden this comes out and all of a sudden he's backpedaling? I think that Nick is onto something. I think nobody wants to talk about it. And here's the truth. I remember when we talked about there might be some deep politics at play. Why all of a sudden in 1 week did you change your mind? The reason I bring it up is because I'm not guessing on this one. You know what? I'm not guessing. I think that there's some deep-rooted political stuff going on behind this. I think people will be surprised by teams that are going to vote no. But I don't agree with that. I don't agree with them voting no on it. We got to have a centric body that can dictate rules in the game. We must. It is a must. But here's the question that I have. Does the House settlement case end what is going on with collectives in NIL?
I think that that's a jump that we can't get to just yet. I do think that it's an important question, but I think that this is the first thing at hand for that to be okay. That's going to come out when that news comes out on what is on the official documents, and Ross Dellinger will probably have a very detailed article highlighting all the things.
Understand fully. We're going to have to.
It's going to be complicated as shit. Yeah, it's going to. I mean, that might take 2 episodes. But okay, I want to clarify a couple things though here. Unless you were, did you have anything else you want to add?
All I was going to say is I think it's right for the sport. Go ahead.
So a couple things I saw a couple people asking what power will they have? It is supposed to be a new enforcement organization called the College Sports Commission. The CEO is going to be making a 7-figure salary, and his role is going to be doling out punishments when they feel they have violated rules. And this is more specific to tampering, recruiting, transfer portal, similar to probably the Michigan case of sign stealing, things that involve cheating on the field. That is what his decision-making is going to be. As you mentioned, all decisions are going to be final. I think that coaches are going to put up a stink, but I don't think that athletic directors will. I think athletic directors are just going to put their hands up in the air and say, we don't have a choice and we just have to do this. And you have to put up with it to their coaches. And the last part with this that caught my attention.
Well, they're going to get a coach's vote too. Just throwing that out there.
We'll see how much power that has.
I got to be honest with you. I'm very curious to see what the Big Ten and the SEC coaches do. I think these other smaller conferences are going to vote yes, and I fully don't believe that the SEC and Big Ten is going to do it, Joe. I mean, let's just be real for just a moment. Do you think that these schools who are plucking kids from smaller institutions are going to want to vote yes for this? I don't think
we would have gotten this far, though. Like, I don't think
they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice.
They might not, but they might not like it, though. I agree with what you're saying. They've been the biggest violators of it, and I forget, somebody said recently. This is going to bug me, that a lot of the NIL that's happened recently, you tagged me in this, would all have violated any rules if there was any type of punishment that was dished out. I understand what you're saying, but I just don't think that. I think as much of a fight as they're going to put up, it would hold back the sport, and I would hope that they're not stupid enough to do it. And I think a lot of athletic directors are so frustrated that they're going to tell their coaches to, like, you need to back off of this because our lives are turning into hell, and we need to put ourselves in a position to actually fix this.
Let me stop for just a second. I know it sounds like I'm defending this. I'm not defending it. Just so me and you are clear, I'm not defending these coaches. Like I just said earlier, I agree with you that they got to do something. I don't mind the commissioner. My whole thing is going to be, when whoever it is that's going to be hired, it is about the rules. Who's going to be the first team that you tag? Who's the first team that you're going to tag? And then secondly, is everything in the past washed? It's kind of got to be.
Yeah, they can't do that. Everything has to be grandfathered in. It would cause one of the biggest problems. It would cause more problems than this not going through. Like, that would ruin everything. Everyone would get clipped.
And everything in the past is a wash. This is all about ongoing things. All right. Joe, you get commissioners in those rooms. I have faith it can work. I don't trust who the governing body behind him is going to be, though. I want it to be there. I want there to be rules to be enforced. I don't trust Deloitte being in there. Look, the idea that they have is really good. Having the 4 college commissioners in there, I don't like. I also don't like having Deloitte being the ones that are overseeing this. Joe, Deloitte, for what it's worth, and I'll speak on my own knowledge, they will go into government situations and business situations and run places into the ground and then overtake them. That is what Deloitte is. Just so everyone understands what they are, they're a company that you call at the last resort. So I would just say I don't trust them. It's a bunch of out-of-university college kids that are reading papers and are trying to dictate law. That's what they did in government. That's what they've done in a lot of businesses. Regardless of all of that, I love the idea. I'm going to be really interested to see who it is, and then we can make a determining factor. But we'll see. I love the premise. I don't know if I love the structure, if that makes sense. Okay. Not how I love that finally we're doing something about it, which I love. There's got to be law and order. I don't know if I like the structure what Pete Thamel laid out here.
That's the sentiment that I have. I think that there's still a lot of uncertainty that comes from this, that there's a lot of moves that will change what was reported in the article. Things could certainly still change. As we know, when settlements are coming to the last step, there's a lot that can be altered at the final buzzer. There's a lot of things that could be changed at the last second. I can't speak on the Deloitte thing because of a personal connection. If you think that it's not going to work, I trust your judgment on your end.
Well, let me stop you right there. 70% of things that wouldn't have gone through in NIL. Let's hold on. Yes. Did they read every state law?
I would assume that they have the firepower to probably be able to enlist enough people to read every
NIL deal of. I'm just going to use the conference in the SEC, and they went per state law. They got hired a month ago.
It's a huge company, so they've got enough resources to do that.
I got it. They didn't do that in a month. They ain't got that many people on this to read all of that in a month. There's no way. Continue though, but that's what I'm saying. There's no way.
Okay. the last part with this, I see a couple people, Elks being one of them, throwing in here like, who is it going to be? It was referenced in the article. Sources have told ESPN to expect the person to come from outside college athletics and not to be a household name to college sports fans. So I would think that this is going to be a hire that's really similar to the Charlie Baker one. And what I mean by that is finding someone who is a former college athlete, somebody maybe who at one point worked in a college administration, something like that, that is a current sitting CEO at a massive company. That is what I feel like it is going to be. Somebody comments Joe Biden.
Well, it's very enticing because it's a 7-figure salary. And by the way,
oh yeah, the counter to that though is you're going to receive the most vitriolic hate from every single fan across the country. Everybody's doing Charlie Baker already.
Well, hold on. If all Power 4 conferences are going to pay this individual, I would bet to venture that there is a percentage in that salary like Roger Goodell's is. So the more the NFL makes, the more money
they'll probably negotiate.
Right.
That.
All I'm going to say is there are going to be people that want this. Now, I don't know who it's going to be. I'm not going to even pretend. I'm not even going to pretend to know who I would want, because I don't think that I've been able to sit there and ask myself the question, Joe, long enough, who would run it? Now, everybody would say someone like Saban. His ass don't want that. Joe, you're
right. I don't think that this doesn't fit Saban. We need somebody who's an administrator. Saban's not an administrator.
Well, think about this. What do administrators in that level of role do? Lawyers, cops, investigators, what do they all do? They're trying to fix problems. He doesn't want to go back into having to fix problems. Right. He's never going to want to do that. He literally said it. Now, I do think there was some politics being played, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, he probably knows who it is, and he probably doesn't like it. It's possible.
Well, you bring up a very interesting point. Here's my question. Is it going to be Greg Sankey?
No, because again, it's going to be somebody who does not have a direct tie. Because I'm sure that was the first question that reporters asked.
But see, here's the problem with that. That's not existent. You can't.
I bet he wants it. I bet that he wants it, but I do not think that anyone in the right mind would allow for him to do that, because that would ultimately give a bias towards the SEC in any decision.
I mean, Joe, I'm not trying to be rude, but there was that whole thing of Charlie Baker's niece or whoever being a student at Michigan. You always have.
Wait, hold on. I know you're going to say that someone can always have a tie somewhere, but like he's directly the commissioner of the SEC. We can't take a sitting
I agree.
commissioner.
No, I agree.
We can't do that. By the way, some of the suggestions in the chat are ridiculous. Somebody said Dwayne Johnson. Somebody said Snoop Dogg.
It's not
going to be.
Anybody said Josh Pate? If he was in here, I'm sure he would say, "I'm going to take it."
I love Pate. I do not think this does not sound as fun as everyone thought it did. This sounds like it sucks. This sounds like it is going to be like penny pinching, like on everybody's ass, like completely uptight type of a leader.
Yeah. Can I throw a little bit of a curveball at you? Did you see Jay Billis's comments to Pat 40 after this was released? I mean, I did it again. After Pete Thamel, after this was released.
No,
he said that he thought that college athletics is going to get sued again behind this.
Probably. No, knowing how happy everyone is right now.
Well, he's a lawyer. You know that, like, he was an attorney. Yeah. He said it put a cap on him, and I don't. Again, I think people are going to be very interested to see how many teams are going to vote no for this.
Right. I think that there certainly could be a fight that's put up. One random guy I just want to throw out there that came to mind. Mark Shapiro, who was, I doubt that he ends up getting this, but like he's the first guy that I think of that kind of like maybe starts the string of decision making. Tony Petitti, former media executive, gets hired to be the Big Ten commissioner. Mark Shapiro, former ESPN executive.
If you're not going to take Sankey, you can't take Petitti.
No. I'm not saying Petitti. I'm saying Mark Shapiro ran ESPN at one point. He is well connected in the sports world. I feel like somebody like him is where they would be angling.
I look, I'm just not going to speculate on something that I have no idea.
Yeah, there's a lot. It could be somebody so random that we've never heard of, which I wouldn't.
Charlie Baker was very random. Here's the only thing that I'll say in closing: they got to stop this shit with tampering. They got
to be more clear about it. Like they got to be very clear about.
You cannot contact the kid personally. You cannot Joe. Let's just be real. I know agents are contacting a lot of these kids. If you think that these associates are not in recruiting departments around the country aren't contacting these kids to see their interest, you're crazy.
Someone told me yesterday, this is how stupid I know that we talk about this a lot, how like agents are doing this and what you just said. There are some coaches, position coaches, that are so stupid that don't know that they can't do this.
They're DMing them.
Yes, they're DMing like all conference guys that we have on lists for like top 5 players. Somebody told me yesterday, I can't say who and who, but it was like the procedure in which they had was like, hey, do you want to come play for us? And then the response was, do you have $2 million? And the response back was, no. Okay, then this conversation is over. Like that is how dumb some of these tampering conversations are, is that they're treating it like, hey, do you think you want to get drinks on Friday? That's how they're treating it.
Well, so I've asked you the last 3 episodes, because it's come up in some form or fashion. What would be the first thing that you do? You know what the first thing that I would do is? And it might not be, it might take me a minute to get there. We might do some other first things. You know what the first real thing that I would do if it were me? I'm hitting everybody for tampering. Everything gets investigated. I'm going after everyone, because then say you would do this. You pop everybody and say, listen, we're giving everybody a slap on the wrist. Pay a $20,000 fine, $50,000 fine. I don't give a shit what it is. We're going to give you a pop on the wrist. Do it again. Watch what happens. But I would pop everybody. Yeah. Everybody that I could get my hands on in every conference. I know it would sound dumb and crazy, but you know what would happen? It would stop. And you know who wants all of this to happen to? Every university that's not in the power conference. Every one of them. Right. Because their players are getting plucked left and right. All right.
Yep.
So the next thing we're going to discuss here is, I've said Pat 40 4 times in the other segment, but Pat 40 is reporting that there are some things happening between the rivalry between your beloved Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the USC Trojans on their game that is a massive rivalry in the game of college football, potentially coming to an end. We briefly talked about this before the show, but your thoughts on this potentially having some hangups in what was one of the biggest rivalries in the sport?
95 times these two teams have played, and they've been one of the most unique rivalries in the history of the sport. You have a team in the city of Los Angeles squaring off with a team in the middle of nowhere in Indiana, battling it out. Two of the most historic programs and also most decorated, as Notre Dame and USC have the most combined national championships between two teams that face off with one another that consider themselves rivals. Now, what 40 reported was that there is a reluctance from USC to enter into a long-term deal. Now, they are planning to extend it after this current deal ends, but it's only for 1 year. And their reluctance comes from them not knowing how things are going to shape out with the college football playoff format, having the demands of needing to travel for the Big Ten, basically them being soft because things are now a little bit harder for them and they haven't been successful. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that they have removed other premier opponents that they had scheduled and aggressively fought to remove certain opponents, LSU most recently being one of them, correct? That was one of them.
They did fight it in a very hard venture, yes.
And they
paid out not to replay it somewhere in the Southeast.
Right. I keep seeing arguments from USC fans saying that USC can do no wrong. They're in the right for this. Notre Dame needs USC a lot more than USC needs Notre Dame, because Notre Dame plays such an unfavorable weak schedule. Their current Big Ten schedule is so important. If there was as much truth as we want to act as if USC is just so much far greater and stronger, that they're a bolstering piece of Notre Dame's resume. Why is USC 3-7 in the last 10 years? Why are they 5-10 in the last 15? And that's including 2 games in which Notre Dame had to forfeit because of the Everett Golson issue with academic ineligibility. Notre Dame also leads the current series 50-37-5. It is incredibly lopsided, Blake. My last problem with this that really pisses me off with all of it is that, again, USC fans wanting to pitch and say and claim their schedule is so difficult. They might have a couple harder games because they have to play a Big Ten schedule. But I look at them playing Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Michigan, Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa. You're telling me that those games mean anything to you? You think that those matchups are ones that all get you into the college football playoff, not facing off with a ranked Notre Dame team that has been ranked ahead of you? I'm so pissed off by this. Like, it is so clearly on USC's side more than it is on Notre Dame's.
All right, I'm gonna let me go here. Cody Worsham, the associate AD for USC, made a statement. He was at LSU before he was at USC, and quote, told Pat Forty, "We want it to continue. We have sent a contract to Notre Dame. The hang-up has been that we have scheduling issues." All right, I do think a contract was sent. I don't think Cody would go out there and say that it wasn't sent if it wasn't sent. He used sent as the past tense. He didn't say we just sent. He didn't say any of that. He said we just sent. I know Cody. I don't think that he would do that. That's my – knowing the individual, I don't think he would say that and it not be true. The LSU thing was a little bit different in a couple of instances because of this. Joe, there's one thing I'm going to push back on. Rivalries changed in the SEC this year. Long-time standing opponents, teams that I root for around the conference, unless it was a massive opponent that was technically your biggest rival, you played them. I'll just give an example. LSU didn't play Auburn. Okay, A&M still has yet to go to Missouri. Like, they've still yet to go to Tennessee. Rivalries ended this year, and I don't think people understand that. Now, USC and Notre Dame's a different thing. Okay, like it's one of the bigger rivalries in the sport. So I'm not trying to like put 2 and 2 together in reference to a smaller rivalry versus USC and Notre Dame. I'm not trying to do that. It is bigger.
Okay.
The first thing that popped into my mind in saying that is the SEC and Big Ten is about to come to a deal where they play a game against one another in the beginning part of the season every season. At least one. I can understand if you play 9 conference games and then you have to play an SEC team to start off the season. The Big Ten SEC Challenge is what I guess they're calling it here. And then you would have to then play Notre Dame. I can understand how that scheduling part would get a little bit wacky. Joe, that's 11 games. They play 12. So I'm not saying that they can't have tune-up games, but I also understand I'm going to use a word that I hate. I understand what they're saying. I understand the point. That doesn't mean that I don't want them to play. They need to play. It is a rival. But, Joe, if I told you that of the 12 games that you played, you had to play 11 Power 4 opponents and nobody else in the country has to do that, you would say, what would be the pushback that we have to have? Again, I'm just throwing that. I understand the point. You should play the game. I do think a contract was sent out. I don't think Cody is lying on that. I would just say I understand having to play that many P4 opponents. That would be my only push, my only defense of USC. If USC is the team that – because here's the thing. You know good and damn well Notre Dame's not trying to cancel this game. They need the game. Like, they need to have bigger opponents on their schedule.
I don't – they literally just scheduled a 12-year matchup with Clemson. If they wanted to replace USC, they could easily replace USC.
They don't have 10 games that's already scheduled for them, though. They don't have 10 games that a conference schedules for them. They don't. They have to go schedule their right. They have to get in those agreements.
But they're very aggressive about scheduling those games.
Not saying they're not.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they're not. But you also have 10 games that the conference will schedule for you. So then, from an AD standpoint, you got to schedule 2. Like it's a massive difference. They need that more. They need that negotiation power more than what USC does. Because USC is saying, brother, why would we play 11 P4 opponents? Why would we do that?
Someone brought up in the chat, and it's a really good point, is that Notre Dame, USC rather, the position that they are in, they're playing in a conference in the Big Ten. They're not in the SEC. They're in the Big Ten, where the back end of the conference is full of a bunch of teams that don't try and don't give a shit. I just mentioned Northwestern. I just mentioned Purdue. You Michigan are getting opportunity. You're getting the Michigan State could end up being more competitive in the future. But the point is that you have these tune-up games that are already on your schedule. They scheduled Georgia Southern and Missouri State this year. They fit those games in there. I kind of don't really feel bad for USC because you have opportunities to schedule 2 mediocre opponents on your resume if you do choose to. South Carolina's not stopped from scheduling Clemson every single year, despite getting a gauntlet of playing in the SEC.
Joe,
I bet there would be the same sentiment. I bet there'd be the same sentiment if South Carolina dropped that game from both sides. I think that both sides would be extremely
but I also would understand
Florida State. Same thing.
Look, I get it, but again, then you would be in all of those teams are in the same situation. All of them. I mean, Joe, we came into
they haven't canceled rivalries though.
No, they haven't. Look, I'll give you this. There is one thing that I do want to point out. It seems as if that every time that we get a Lincoln Riley involved team, something like this happens, it looks like he's constantly running. It does. The perception.
It's a very important point.
Yeah, the perception is he ran from the SEC. He's running from opponents. He tried to cancel the game against LSU 2 months out, which you won the game. Like you want, like what are you doing? You won the game. I will say this. It is a bit sheepish. Just because I understand the point does not mean that it doesn't come off sheepish, because it does. It comes off as soft as fuck is what it comes off of. I mean, you bring up the point about South Carolina. You bring up the point about Clemson. You bring up the point about Florida and Florida State. None of them have ran. None of them. So
I understand that the general argument from like USC's side and what you're probably going to see in the comments on this segment when we post it is Indiana made it to the playoff because they played a really easy schedule. SMU made it to the playoff because they played a really easy schedule. Those teams did not make it past the first round.
Well, and those teams
were not USC. Competitive enough.
Well, they're not USC.
What I'm trying to get at.
Only thing I would say there would be, Joe, this is a massive football team.
I know. I'm trying.
If we're talking about SMU, those fuckers don't do anything.
I know. What I'm trying to get at is that the team that just won the national championship was a team that was willing to be aggressive with their scheduling and that has been aggressive with their scheduling and is not afraid to challenge other top brands. Because when you face other premier programs, as long as you don't get devastated by injuries, that is how you prepare yourself for an actual playoff run.
Oh, without a doubt.
Ohio State is the example of it. They're a prime example of it. Historically, the SEC has been an example of it, that they're willing to face the best opponents, prepare themselves for battle, and then the ones that survive end up being the best that can go on and win a national championship.
Yeah, and Nick talked about this when he was at Bama. Joe, the teams that declined to play them in the beginning of the season, it wasn't until Sark got there that they played them. You know, like how does that happen?
Right.
It does come off as Lincoln running. And then his comments don't make it any better either, Joe, saying that he didn't agree with moving to the SEC when he was the Oklahoma head coach. Then saying that he did not agree moving to the Big Ten from USC when they moved last year. He said those are open statements. And now he's trying to run from another P4 program. Joe, it does come off as that he wants to take the easy way out. And if you're a USC fan, how do you not see that? Like, you're going to defend the guy that keeps struggling? What are we defending here? What are you defending him here on this? Regardless of how it comes, regardless if you don't think he's sheepish or not, it comes off on the fact of Notre Dame ain't running. Now, again,
no, they want to play him because they know they're going to kick their ass.
The argument, though, in saying everything that we said, okay, I do trust Cody that contract got sent out. I really do. Like, here would be my question. Why would, knowing the individual, why would he come out there and say that it's a scheduling problem?
Okay, wait. The quote that I have that I pulled up was that he says, we want the USC Notre Dame rivalry to continue, which is why we offered an extension of our agreement. So what was reported in 40's article was that it is extended 1 year. USC offered a 1 year extension after the end of the current agreement, but there has not been a long-term resolution that has come from this. So I looked that up when you brought that up because I wanted to, I might be off. I might be misreading that, but that I believe is what he's referencing is that they did offer to extend it, but it is not a multi-year deal like Notre Dame is seeking.
Well, let me ask this question then. And I'm not, again, not trying to defend USC before we turn the page here. In a world where college athletics is constantly changing, and I understand that Notre Dame is Notre Dame and Clemson did what they did, why would you get in a long-term contract with somebody like that? I understand the situation and the rivalry, but I also see it as this too. Is it Notre Dame's biggest rival? Is USC Notre Dame's biggest rival?
Yes, absolutely. They just stole their general manager this past offseason. Chad Bowden left for USC, and that has only stoked the fires of this whole situation. They both know, and if any USC fans want to say that Notre Dame's not, they're lying to themselves.
Would they say it's UCLA?
You can't call it UCLA because UCLA has. They'd love to say it's UCLA because they beat the shit out of UCLA every single time that they play them. So I don't know. It is important for this game for the sport. Here's my one final thought with this.
Okay.
If you're going to remove Notre Dame, it sounds like there's a strong possibility of this happening. They better use this slot to schedule a competitive opponent every single year, because that is what they're framing it as. That is what it's being framed as is, we want to be able to go and do what Texas is doing right now, where they scheduled Michigan, they're scheduling Ohio State. Teams around the country are scheduling premier programs. And then it was also brought up that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to have a scheduling agreement where they will play one another, kind of like in basketball. If they use this spot to schedule random crap teams, I am going to be so much more upset. That first game that they schedule in replacement, if it is not a notable brand, I am going to be livid, and every Notre Dame fan should be.
When that SEC and when the SEC and Big Ten agreement goes through, there might be a chance that USC's in Aggie land or Texas or Baton Rouge or wherever. I understand what you're saying there. I get it. I'm with you. I understand it. I don't think they can run from it. Like there's no running from that. But I understand it. It's a tough situation. And look, you brought up Texas. Texas and Texas A&M didn't play for 12 years.
It's a good point. It's a fair point.
They didn't play for
12
years.
It's not the same degree of. It's a big rivalry, but it's not the same. Degree.
It is. What?
Blake, I said this
Texas
at the beginning.
Texas A&M.
Notre Dame and USC combined for the most national championships between two rivals. There's no one else that compares to this. In terms of there are other more hated rivals like Auburn, Alabama, and Ohio State, Michigan.
Hold on. Bullshit. Auburn, Alabama is not more toxic than Texas A&M. It is not. As someone who lives in the deep South, you're going to tell
no, come on.
Anybody from the state of Texas in the chat right now, tell me I'm wrong. Joe, you're not going to win this one. I promise you.
Well, as somebody who has been lived in Los Angeles that has
okay.
Look, I'm just telling you right now, exposure to both sides.
Okay, fine. Texas A&M is definitely right now more toxic than Bama Auburn. I promise you it is.
That doesn't feel right.
Okay.
Feel right.
Hey, you know who could tell you? Ask our good buddy Chris Phillips over at SEC Unfiltered. See what he says.
I'll ask him.
All right. Joe, we continue on our deep dives here, and we go to the great state of Illinois, as I know that you're fired up about this one. I had a guest on last night who brought up your point, by the way. He said that he's been very intrigued with the Fighting Illini, and I was like, my co-host has also, Joe DeLeone, is also very highly intrigued about Illinois. So you've talked about them a couple of times in the last couple of deep dives, kind of just hinting it out there. Tonight we get to the Fighting Illini. Your thoughts on how they look going into the 2025 season?
Considering how they finished last year, considering the fact that they're not losing much significant production outside of Pat Bryant, who was drafted by the Denver Broncos this past year, I think everybody should be bullish on Illinois. They are right now the most underrated team, and I know that sounds crazy to say when they are currently ranked, I think, by some polls as high as 11. They have exactly what we look for a team that could be unexpectedly good, go to the playoff, maybe even knock off a team, because they bring back a lot of defensive leaders like Xavier Scott, who is a premier defensive back, and Gabe Jacas, who is a very productive quality edge rusher. But I think most importantly, Blake,
were massive too, Joe. The
yes,
sacks were massive.
Most importantly, I think that Luke Altmeyer is such an underrated quarterback in the college game. I don't think that he's going to go on to be a first-round pick. I'm not saying that. I think that he's a little limited in some areas. But if you ask people around the sport, speaking of tampering, he is a guy that a lot of teams really badly wanted to come play for their program. He's a good decision maker. At the beginning of the year, he had a really long stretch where he was barely turning the ball over. His completion percentage was super high. He has everything that we look for in a guy that is going to finish off his career with a really exciting finish. I really like this Illinois team, man. I think front to back, they're one of the most balanced rosters that we can see, especially in the Big Ten.
I want to hit on something first. I'm going to argue with you about defense. Offensively, okay. I think you're spot on. Offensively, Joe, they have 7 offensive linemen that are seniors. They got dudes coming back. Joe, who are the best running teams last year? Who are the best ones? Read them off.
Penn State, Notre Dame.
Penn State, Notre Dame. What are they? Notre Dame maybe a little bit different. Penn State for sure. Oregon, 2 tackles that they got from the portal 2 years ago return. They have their whole offensive line returning. I would even at the end of the year, I would 1,000% put Florida in that mix. And then South Carolina. South Carolina would be the oddball out. What do they all have in common? Everybody returned. Penn State is in the same situation along the offensive line. By the way, they went out and got 2 dudes from the portal that are also seniors. Joe, they got depth. They have so much experience along that offensive line. That is the Bret Bielema special. Welcome to Arkansas. I mean, hold on. I didn't just misspeak. Welcome to the Fighting Illini. Bret Bielema is replicating what he did at Arkansas. It's the same exact thing. We're going to take a couple of licks early in my tenure here. We're going to go along the offensive line. We're going to pound the rock with a 3-headed running back roster. Oh, wait. You have 3 running backs who all got over 75 carries last year. Does it sound familiar? Joe, this is the year where when Bielema was at Wisconsin and when Bielema was at Arkansas, it's the same exact thing. A 3-headed monster at running back. Where have I heard that with a Bret Bielema team before? It literally – do we remember Melvin Gordon? Do you remember that year where they had 3 running backs over 500 yards? Does this sound familiar? Now, I don't know if their running backs that they have right now are Melvin Gordon-type seasons. I don't know if that's going to happen. Joe, the question will be, and was always under Bielema, with Russell Wilson or when he was at Arkansas, wherever he's been, can they throw the ball enough in critical games? Is Luke Altmeyer the guy enough that can lead them to where they want to go? I don't think you're far off when you got that many O-linemen returning, running backs returning. The question would be, can they separate themselves at wide receiver to some extent? Now, they go out and get Hudson Clement from West Virginia, who had a massive season last year. They go out and get a 6'5 receiver in Justin Bowick, who's 6'5", 210. I like what look, I know what I'm going to get with Bret Bielema, and if Luke Altmeyer takes that next step, Joe, they could be a little bit dangerous here offensively on how they do things. They're not going to be top 20 in offense. They're not going to be in top 20 in a lot of these things, but when you turn on the film and you're like, shit, they're number one in the country in time of possession, number one in the Big Ten in turnover rate. Why is that? That is Bret Bielema football. I push back on one thing I'm a little nervous about. You talked about Gabe Jacas. You talked about DeLeone. Those guys coming back. The issue I have is they went in the portal and got 4 defensive linemen. Joe, they might predict some of these at minimum to be rotation players, and maybe they will be. They're fine in some areas along that defensive line. Joe, they went out and got dudes with 0 production. 0. And you know as well as I do, they can be fine in some areas. Like TJ Parker and Peter Woods last year for Clemson. We think that those are 2 NFL guys. My question ultimately comes about depth, and why did you have to go get 4? 4 is a lot for that position.
I trust the evaluation capabilities of Bielema for defensive linemen because of what we saw 2 years ago when we were high on them, but we were a little early with Jer'Jon Newton and Keith Randolph. James Thompson Jr. was hurt this past year, so his production wasn't as good as it usually is. He's the big name of the group and the most underrated name of the group. He is a guy that I've spoken very highly of over the past 2 years. I recommended him to an agent a couple of years ago when I was still doing scouting evaluations for a company that was producing evaluations on players. I think that Thompson has the ability to be a top 100 pick. I think that he has the length and the flexibility to be a very productive defensive lineman for this team alongside Gabe Jacas. I don't know a lot about some of the other guys that they brought in, so I'm not going to pretend to hype them up because I don't know as much. But I'm telling you, James Thompson Jr. is going to be the most underrated defensive lineman addition out of any of these teams that we've talked about this offseason.
Well, they went and got Thompson, who's a year 6 guy out of the portal from Wisconsin. They went out and got Kurt Neal, also from Wisconsin. Joe, we're so far into this portal era that it scares the shit out of me when you go for one position and you go after that many guys. Again, Florida State is always in the back of my mind, but they're not the only ones. Who are some of the teams last year that we thought that had high expectations but had to hit the portal at a ridiculous rate? You know who I think of? I think of LSU. I think of Bama. I think of Michigan to some extent. I think of USC. I think of who am I leaving off here?
Colorado.
Well, I don't expect them to do anything really, but those teams had a Ole Miss is the outlier, but Ole Miss, to their standard, what was their standard coming into the year? Their standard was playoff or bust, right? I mean, am I wrong there? Because the perception for me was last year, it's playoff or bust for Ole Miss, and they don't get there. I mean, you could say the same thing for South Carolina, but they would be the outlier of that. That makes me nervous. Now, Jacas, I mean, Joe, the 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, I do think they have pieces. Secondary, I thought, Joe, quite honestly, is where they've developed a little bit better. There were parts and times in the season they were top 3 in the country for passing yards allowed. The thing about that, though, they were, for a lot of that season, they were top 3 in the Big Ten. So, look, I don't disagree with you along the defensive line. My thing would be is, based off of what we've seen from their secondary 2 of the last 3 years, when they've been some of the top units in the Big Ten, that's where I start looking at and say, I get what you're saying about the defensive line, but it worries me, man. It really does.
I just don't think it's at the same density as some of these other teams that we get super, super worried about with them having to bring in a lot of new bodies. It's 3 new guys. I know that they're all projected to be starters for this team. They are going to try and rely on a lot of different bodies. They weren't great against the run. This is a way for them to improve against the run this upcoming year. I do think that it's great, though, that Xavier Scott's coming back, who was one of the best defensive backs in the country. But again, another guy that just doesn't get a lot of recognition because he's not playing for one of the more premier brands in the sport.
He'd be an All-American at Ohio State.
Probably, yeah. He's a great player.
I mean, is there really a probably?
No, he would be. I mean, he's a guy that's on the NFL radars as well. A lot of people thought he was going to declare this upcoming year, and he decided to go back. And it's a very underrated move that they're able to keep him.
I agree. You talked about the running game. That was going to be my last point here. So my concerns were about bringing in that many guys along your defensive line. Joe, do you want me? I mean, I'm not going to, but I can if any Fighting Illini fan wants to argue with me. Joe, they're not in the top 50 in any run statistic defensively. They weren't. They got pushed around. And so when a team gets pushed around in certain situations, quite frankly, you got to kind of prove it to me. If I'm just being dead honest, you're going to have to prove that you fix those situations. Now, Joe, if these 4 guys would have had any level of production, like Kurt Neal, I mean, he's got some level of production. Joe, in 4 years, he's got 45 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and a half a sack. And I'm supposed to sit here and say, hey, man, that's 10 tackles a season. That's depth piece. Is that a depth piece? Like, I don't know if they've changed it. We'll have to wait and see. And I could be dead ass wrong. And I will admit if I'm dead ass wrong. You got a year 6 guy who has, Joe, not over – Joe, you have a guy that you're wanting to be in your 2 deep at minimum, rotational piece at worst. In 6 years, he doesn't have 60 tackles.
Okay. Not to hyper-focus on a very specific player, I do think with the schedule that they have upcoming for this year is extremely favorable, and that, I think, is the most important thing.
Let's get there.
Okay. To quickly read through it, Western Illinois at Duke versus Western Michigan at Indiana versus USC at Purdue versus Ohio State, bye week at Washington versus Rutgers, bye week versus Maryland at Wisconsin versus Northwestern. They do not face Oregon or Michigan, and they have 1 West Coast trip. So an incredibly favorable schedule that sets up, and they host Ohio State. So there's a very favorable situation for them to finish the year 10-2.
They could. My question becomes, where are the 2 losses? You're going to have to beat Ohio State or Indiana when you get there. One of them you got to, I say, knock off, but I do think that going to Bloomington's not going to be easy. USC is homecoming. I mean, I'd have no idea what we're really going to make of USC. Joe, they got to go to Washington. Like, there are a couple of trip-up games here. But,
right,
Joe, if they're 6-2, 7-2, whatever it may be, and you have Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern, they're going to a playoff.
Easily. I'd be shocked if they dropped one of those. Shocked.
Look, I think going into Madison, Wisconsin in any part of the year could be tricky. We saw what happened to Oregon last year. Joe, remember Oregon almost got clipped. Like, they almost got clipped by Wisconsin. Ohio State struggled with them for 3.5 quarters before Jeremiah Smith said hello. So, again, it's not an easy place to go in there and play.
Right.
They could do it, though. I see the path for them.
Absolutely. It's all there.
Luke Altmeyer is going to have to throw. He's going to have to be better. We spent this whole segment. We didn't even bring him up.
I do think that's important, but I think he showed some really good signs of being a good decision maker.
I do too. Best decision he ever made was leaving where he was, but previous. I mean, that's not a shot at. Well, he was never going to play.
Right, he wasn't going to play.
And then Austin Simmons came on board. All right, we'll see y'all on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. Y'all have a good night.
Yes.
Peace.